I win. And you do, and that's what happens. Or they drop the permutation. Permutation do both means that it's possible to move away from the securitizing portions of the advantages. So the helium-3 act, it is possible to remove ourselves from the way international politics plays out and trying to build a moon base. That's the alternative, is we shouldn't have the mindset of trying to dominate space. It is possible to try to not dominate space because we are focused on creating environmental sustainability. You have an advantage that doesn't link to the K, means the permutation is able to resolve the portion that does. What?
What if there's let's say the helium advantage we have has the China advantage that China is going to be a threat.
Yeah.
Or security K. Like, how do you get around them not linking that you're trying to protect yourself from China?
That may be true, and the permutation would reject those portions of the act, but because you have a portion of the act that doesn't link, that's the part you advocate in the permutation. You're like, look, your alternative clearly rejects security logic. You're right that two of our advantages clearly have security logic. That means the permutation would include the rejection of those portions. So yes, the alternative would resolve both of those advantages. Both of those advantages are not true, but you have an argument that is conceded that doesn't link to your K. Permutation is still able to advocate the plan action, build a base on the moon, right? And able to agree that two of our advantages are bad, but the permutation allows us to realize that those are bad, while we still have a reason the act is good that you don't have a link to. So always try to read an add-on in the 2AC, or have an advantage in the 1AC that doesn't link to the K they're reading. And if they don't read specifically in the block, tell them they're SOL. Sorry, out of luck. Well, you'll take a question.
For me?
Yeah.
I didn't have a question.
Okay. Now, this is the big thing, because we're all policy debaters here, right? Framework. What is the utility of framework in the K debate? Anyone?
It tells the judge how they should view the round and how they should.
I mean, that's the definition of framework, yes, but what's the utility of it?
Basically, make a framework where you validate the app before the K.
That's cheating. That's just as cheating as the AR. And that is the same argument that every single app makes. 2AC, your framework argument is, we get away our app against the status quo or a competitive policy option. That's good because policy debate education is good. We shouldn't have to debate against an alternative because screw the K, right? And then they get stands up and they're like, really? Just exclude the K? Our argument's exclusion bad, Judge. We like hippies and stuff. We should let everything happen. And then the 1AR, here's the trick. The 1AR stands up and is like, yes, you're right. We should let everything happen. That means we get to weigh the AF against the alt. You race to the middle. The 2AC makes framework argument. You don't get to have the K. The 2NC is like, nah, Judge, stupid. The 1AR is like, we agree, Judge, stupid. We're going to run to the middle. You can have your alt as long as we get away the AF. So your 1AR, the framework should begin with permutation. You can have an alternative as long as we get away the AF against it. This prevents them from making all of their cheating arguments like fiat doesn't exist, you don't get to pass the plan, or epistemology first. And it's a framework argument that they have already made a justification for you and the block. Right? They have already said we shouldn't arbitrarily exclude arguments from debate. You're right, we shouldn't. That's why we should get away the app. Because K's win by winning a cheating argument like a floating pick, value to life arguments, util bad, or you don't get away the app against the K. The K will never win on outweighing the app just on impacts. They have to win some type of framing argument in order to beat your app. It's just fact. Anybody disagree with that? Have you ever lost to a K when I'm like, yeah, you get away your app, yeah, util's good, we prove we have a better internal link to nuclear war than you do? Have you ever lost on the argument that the alt solves the app? Have you ever debated the argument the alternative solves the app? Yeah, those are epistemological questions. The argument is not alternative solves the app, it makes China not a threat. The argument is, alternative solves the app because we were able to see China in a non-threatening light that reduces the necessity for us to go to war with China. It is a change in epistemology. The response to those types of arguments are, win your app. You've read authors that say the opposite of the argument they are making. And framework lets you get there. If you win framework that we get away the app, then you get to use your affirmative authors that wrote all of the evidence for your 1AC that say China is a threat to prove that they are wrong. Because their argument is China's not a threat, we shouldn't see them as a threat, so we don't preemptively go to war with them. If you get away the app, you get to prove China is a threat. Alternative cannot resolve that, only the plan can.
So when you weigh, say, can we tell the judge, hey, we should be able to weigh the app against the K, and then you do it?
The 1AR. That's the 1AR argument. The 2AC argument is no Ks are cheating. You should never allow them. Then they'll make all the arguments for you. Then the 1AR argument is permutation, race to the middle. We get away the app. You get to have an alt. We'll debate your alternative on fair ground. Okay?
Why can't you make that argument in the 2AC to begin with?
You can, but then they're going to make all of their critical reasons as to why the plan is bad and say fiat is bad and all that jazz. As opposed to making the hippie arguments that every high school K team will, which is you exclude us, exclusion is bad, and then also making like critical education is good. And you're like, yeah, critical education is good. You've conceded policy education is also good. You're right, we shouldn't exclude you anymore. You shouldn't exclude us. We get away both. Plus, if they drop it and the block, it's better to have them drop, you don't get an alternative, than to have them drop, we get away the app. It's just a strategic thing. Next thing is question the way the alternative resolves the internal links to their arguments, right? So McDonald's alternative is to see space in a way that doesn't involve the vital portions of international relations. So like, don't view China as a threat in the context of space, right? How does this resolve status quo tensions with China? Your argument is, we want to get to space, we want to protect our moon base, so we put up space militarization weapons. That means we attack China because they fear our weapons. China fears us in the status quo. We don't have anything in space right now, and we're already counterbalancing against China through places like having a fleet aircraft carrier in Japan, having our extended nuclear deterrent over Taiwan. If your alternative only affects the plan, it doesn't resolve status quo issues of already feeling threatened by China. So yeah, you may have an internal link about the app. That internal link is also true in other situations, and your alternative does not resolve those other situations. Or if it does, the permutation, that's utopian fiat. Their argument is literally, we make the world better, perm solves that. That's also another argument, is if they ever say that their alternative is utopian and makes the world better no matter what, then the permutation also does that. Because it literally fiats that no one ever hates each other. So the permutation also fiats no one ever hates each other. And you should never lose to utopian fiat alternative. Even Lane Kersch couldn't win after he made a utopian fiat. He lost to the perm. And he's a lot better than all of you are, and better than me. He was in semis of the NDT, that kid's good. Okay, impact terms. Difference between impact terms and case-out ways, what are they? Come on, I said this earlier.
That the impact terms are like, I mean, they're only the same if the K is like literally the opposite.
Yes. So if you read the We Should Colonize Mars app that the K-Lab's putting out, that's actually not very KE at all. It's really just a policy app. If you read that app and someone says space security against you, your app doesn't say hedge good. So you can totally say hedge good in 2AC. And you can just take them up on that debate. If you think that the block front-loaded on a bunch of like reps first cards and discourse shapes reality cards and epistemology cards, and you're like, crap, the 1AR does not have enough time to answer all of their cheating arguments because that's all the block did, then impact term. Because yeah, discourse comes first, but if we win that hegemony is good, then our discourse is good. We'll take you up on that debate. Here's 2 Kagan cards. You read some arguments about why we feel threatened by China and why that causes war with China. War with China is the crap, or the shit, because China sucks, is going to kill us otherwise. Read those cards in the 1AR if you're getting leveled on the cheating arguments debate. Okay? This goes back to my epistemology and ontology first argument. Same thing with discourse. If they don't make a discourse argument in 1 and C, don't assume they have, and don't let the judge assume they've made one. Call it out at the same time you would call it epistemology and ontology. The other thing about discourse arguments that don't make sense, right, is they say discourse link. That literally means that if you win, that your advantage is good. So say you read the hedge good advantage and they read the discourse link to the security K. If you win that hegemony is good, you've won your discourse is good. Because discourse is just the way you represent the world. And if they say the way you represent the world is bad because it creates no value to life because we're always afraid of something, and if you win that something we should be afraid of, and those are the ones the 1AC talks about, you've won, your discourse is good. So they may go for a discourse argument in the 2NR. The top of your 2AR should be case outweighs, They say discourse. If we win disadvantage, that is the opposite of their K, it proves our discourse is good because we have won a truth claim about the world. And therefore, we should respond to that truth claim. Okay? Now, specific case. The frontier K that the K-Lab is putting out. We'll talk about that. That argument is that American national identity is rooted in terms of trying to tame the wilderness and bring civilization to an ever-expanding wilderness. Manifest Destiny saw this. Then we moved to places like Afghanistan, Iraq, and now we're moving into space with like the Kennedy launch program and Constellation and whatnot. And that this tries to create a mindset of America as the premier of the world who can bring civilization and light to the dark places. The easiest answer to this is simply, yes, America is the best. Suck it. That's like the easiest answer to this argument. The way this argument will win is because the framework cards are really, really good about frontier mentalities coming first. So, you need to read every argument that you possibly can in the 2AC and 1AR about policy education being good and why we should not prioritize other questions above policy making. I know that there's a card in the file because I put it there in the after answers that is written by this dude named Owen. His argument is that if we prioritize other concerns above policy making, it leads to an infinite regression. The easiest example of this to give is things like World War II and the nuclear bomb. So if they say we need to focus on what caused us to have the strike first, that is an epistemological concern because it's where did the knowledge for frontier mentalities come from, right? Those arguments. How did we come to know that we should conquer the frontier? The answer to this is, how do we know that we should have dropped the bomb on Hiroshima? Well, we don't, because it was a product of World War II. But where did World War II come from? The Treaty of Versailles. Where did the Treaty of Versailles come from? World War I. Where did that come from? The economic downturn in Europe that produced a military buildup because of the Industrial Revolution. Where did the Industrial Revolution come from? Capitalism. Where did capitalism come from? Feudalism. And so whenever policymakers take concerns like that prior to passing policy, it leads to an infinite regression, and we're already back in the 1800s and middle-age feudalism. From should we drop the bomb on Hiroshima, we got to feudalism. Why should policymakers be concerned with feudalism whenever they're trying to decide whether or not we should end World War II by dropping a nuke? Answer is we shouldn't, because it goes back farther than that. And if we do that, it takes us too long to be able to make an accurate policy determination about what we should do because we've gone too far back into the past for it to be relevant to the status quo. That's especially true of the Frontier K because the alternative is an interrogation into the history of how frontier knowledge came to be. The argument is literally, we should interrogate how we got this American national identity. You're like, no, we shouldn't, because that creates bad policy making. And it justifies a permutation so much more. Your own evidence says, yes, you may be right that sometimes some things need to be engaged, but we cannot forego policy action to do those investigations.
Could you set them up for that own card and cross-X by like asking them why does the alternative have to solve and be like
how? Actually, the better question is how is the alternative solved?
I agree with that, but I'm saying like why do we need to solve this alternative? And then they answer like let's say because U.S. say China's a threat, and we'd be like why does we say China's a threat? And do what you just did and try to go back to the end of cross-X and be like look it's infinitely aggressive. We could have.
That's like 3 minutes of wasted time. You only need to do it like 2 examples. Even in debates I do, I don't go back to feudalism. I end up World War I. Like that, you've already proven your point. It only takes like 6 seconds spreading to go back to World War I and be like, look, it proves that the history goes back too far. Also, World War I is not relevant to policy decisions we have to make now because we can't undo the past.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Those types of arguments. It also sets you up for a see the political type argument. Does anyone know what a see the political argument is? See the political is a generic answer to K alternatives that say that's because you abandoned politics, like we should focus on X instead of policy. Because your alternative would say that smart people or academics should abandon the policy route in favor of epistemology, it lets the people who will not be concerned with epistemology control over the political arena. Like the tried and true example of this is super right-wing conservatives. If all of us academics were like, we're not worried about you right now, we'll focus on where American national identity came from. Then we'll get back to you, Congress, on what we think you should do. The hawks in Congress would be like, hell yeah, we aren't accountable to anybody right now, and do whatever the hell they wanted. Iraq, V2. But remember, do any of you remember the election slogan, bomb Iran, bomb Iran? That would definitely happen.
Can you say that again?
See the political is an argument that if academics were to abandon policy